welcome. Thanks for coming out in the rain. This is the Psychology of Teen Wellbeing, and I'm Katie Burke. I'm a staff member with Princeton Learning Cooperative. So we're an organization that helps teens to figure out who they are, where they want to go, help them build lives for themselves. The topic for tonight, teen well-being, is one that's pretty close to my heart because I've been working with teenagers for a very long time. This is my 14th year working with teenagers. I've been working with them pretty much since I was one, fresh out of college. And it's kind of a crazy ride working with teenagers every day. You never know what you're going to expect. But that's because that's how their lives are. You know, everything is new all the time. And they're dealing with a lot of struggles. You know, they're struggling with friendships and academics and relationships and getting along with their parents and figuring out what they want to do with the rest of their lives and figuring out who they are right now. And that's just if everything goes the way it's supposed to. So it's a lot on their plate. You know, and we try to help them out, prepare them for the future by, you know, pushing them to work a little bit harder, work a little bit harder, work a little bit harder. You know, and there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, but I found being around them all the time, they remind me how hard it is growing up. You know, that growing up in and of itself is hard work. They're working all the time. And, you know, to that end, I think it would be nice if we could shift, you know, our emphasis a little bit from teen performance to teen well-being. And that's really what tonight is all about. So we have a wonderful group of panelists here who have lots of knowledge and experience, and I'm really grateful that, you know, they've come out here tonight to give their time. I'm just going to ask you to speak a little bit about what you do, and then speak on the topic from your perspective, and at the end we'll open it up to questions from the audience. So let's start with Jane Martin.
I'm a psychotherapist, and I work at a holistic wellness center, and it's called Volition, a little bit north of Princeton. I have 3 grown children, so I did the teen thing. And I work with, well, actually I'm starting a support group for teens. This is actually less flyer, whoever wants it. It's not necessarily therapeutic, it's more social emotional learning. So, you know, those skills that we sometimes neglect to teach our teens in school, like dealing with your emotions or having relationships or resolving conflict and focusing your mind. So we teach those skills. I don't know, I use those skills every day. Calculus I learned I use never, whatever. So work with a program called Retribe, which is for teens, and we do rites of passage for teens in the summer. And I'll talk a little bit about that later, what a rite of passage is. And then lastly, I do a program called Social Harmony, which is an anti-bullying program for schools. So that's me. I'm going to talk today about 2 things, as fast as I can. One is discipline, and the other is transcendence. So in terms of discipline, well, the stuff I'm saying is in this book, which is not existing yet. But if you're interested in it, let me know. I'll take your name or something. So when I think of children, I think of the metaphor of a horse and cart. And that the reins in that horse and cart are your decisions. Where is the cart going to go? And when we have a baby, we get in the cart with them, and we hold the baby in our lap, and we hold the reins. And that's healthy. That's how it's supposed to be, because babies don't know how to drive. And there's a whole body of research around what they call attachment theory that says, yeah, that's the healthy way to be. The parents make the decisions. They're the authority. They drive the car. Sometimes I see that in our society, parents are uncomfortable taking that alpha role and telling their kids what to do, because that would be like overpowering them or being fascist or something. And you kind of end up, you know, I'm in the grocery store and I see this mom and she's got a steak in her hand next to the freezer section, and she asks her 3-year-old, should we get this steak? I'm thinking, what does she imagines going on in that 3-year-old mind? You know, it is a little expensive. Will it fit our budget? For a teen, however, it's healthy to give back the reins, to move from authority to guidance, because you only have about 5 years to help them learn how to make their decisions. And if you don't, they walk out of the door at age 18, and I see the results. My son is a psychologist. He works at university counseling centers. And these kids whose parents would not give them decision-making power, when they're teens, they're always yes, yes, yes. Yes, I want to drink. No, you may not. Yes, I want this. No, you may not. And they don't learn how to take that no and put it in their own head. So when they go to college, it's all yes. And they end up doing really dangerous things, drinking until they drop and they don't do their homework. And my son is a very busy man. So for teens, it's healthy to move from authority to guidance. And unfortunately, though, it isn't like you can just take the reins and give it to your 13-year-old, because your 13-year-old is pretty likely to drive the cart right into a tree. So what do? And the way I think of it is that we take our hands and wrap our hands around their hands. You give the reins, they're holding the reins, your hands are right there. And when they're aiming for the tree, you grab back the control. And you don't walk away. You do it with them. You make decisions with them. So you would ask them questions and point their attention to what you want them to consider. What are some options that we could come up with? Let's brainstorm. I wonder what might be the consequence of that action. And they're like, I wonder what she would feel if you did that. I wonder if her needs are being met or if you would be violating her needs. Some teams, it's really important to point them back to their own needs. Well, is that meeting your need? How do you feel about that? And it also gives opportunity for valuing, like for creating their own values. I see it's really important to you to be honest, but you don't want to hurt her feelings. You want to be nice. How can you speak the truth in a kind way and integrate those seeming poles? So that kind of wisdom practice they can get from you. And then as they become good at making decisions, you kind of loosen your grip and they make more and more of their own decisions until they're 16 or 17 and they're pretty much making their own decisions. Except, when they get the hard ones, they come to you. And I think that that's pretty much, hopefully, indefinite, that they would come to you with problems. And my children still call me, and when they're figuring out the life things, that was yesterday. So, and I'm really glad about that. I think it's healthy. I ask for my help from friends and things. Yeah, so that's the discipline stuff I wanted to say. And I wanted to ask you to think about when a parent of a young child refuses to take the reins, like the grocery store lady, what is the result that you guys see? Chaos.
Child has an inflated sense of importance.
And yes, that everything that they want, all their wins, so important. And they'll die. They don't get everything they want. Yeah. Anything else? For me, I see it sometimes like rude behavior or ill health. I don't feel like going to bed. I couldn't go to bed because he didn't want to go to bed. How about when a parent of a teen fails to give back some decision-making power? What do you see then? Yeah. Butting heads. That's supposed to be normal in teenagers, but I don't think it needs to be there. Yeah.
Lying and subversive behavior because they have to go around.
Yeah, so then it's their need for autonomy is really strong, and to feel that autonomy, they'll sometimes do completely spiteful, dangerous things to feel that.
Or they don't recognize their need for autonomy. They don't trust themselves to take the reins because they've pretty much
can't.
Right.
You get given the message to just be quiet and follow. Yeah, just obey authority, and that's what's equals good, something like that. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was about this cool thing. I want to talk about transcendence. And I'm noticing this really cool thing about how the body mirrors our psychological growth. And in this case, when kids are 11 or 12, the front of their brain, the prefrontal cortex, proliferates, gets more, and they get all these new capacities that live here in the frontal lobes. What lives here is our executive functions and our highest functions, like emotional regulation and impulse control and decision making and planning and empathy and attachment and all these yummy stuff, and ability to focus. When people get more a new developmental capacity, there's a concomitant drive usually that goes with it. So like if a 1-year-old gets the capacity to stand and walk, then they have an urge, a biological urge to do that. And if you don't let the child do that developmental process, you get this. It would be like if you didn't let your 1-year-old walk, you'd get a lot of this. So with teens, they have this new capacity for decision making. That's here, the prefrontal dorsolateral cortex. And for a lot of these capacities, so decision making being one. One of the new capacities in the frontal lobes is for transcendence. There's a researcher at, no, actually she just died. Her name is Candace Burt. She was at National Institutes of Health. She's the chief of brain biochemistry. And she wrote The Molecules of Emotion. You guys know who she is. So she said this thing that she was studying the frontal lobes of long-term meditators. And the way she put it is, when the long-term meditators, it's the prefrontal cortex that lights up and is active. If there was a part of the brain that had God in it, the prefrontal cortex is the way I think about it. And she goes, that's not very scientific. So that part of the brain is developing, and the drive is there in the teens. And if we don't give them a channel to express that and have that experience, they will go looking for it anyway. And they'll go looking for it with drugs, with driving their car 100 miles an hour, have that feeling of aliveness and meeting death, of riding their skateboard on the edge of the cliff, the drama, the prama, my daughter used to say the prama. So there's an African proverb that says, if we don't initiate our young, they'll burn down the village just to feel the heat. And so there's a bunch of research that's coming out now that's showing this link between not having an initiation experience, the rite of passage for our adolescents, and all these behaviors. I printed out some and put it over on the table if you want to see them. So there's an anthropological survey that found that 94% of cultures throughout time around the world have had a rite of passage, some kind of socially sanctioned means to induce an altered state of consciousness for transcendence or emotional healing. Spiritual transcendence means spiritual, just like when you're in academia, you're not allowed to use the word spiritual, you have to say transpersonal or something like that. So we do in our society have commemoration of the transition from child to adulthood. We have a bar mitzvah or confirmation, but it's it's sort of an outer symbolic gesture rather than an intense inner experience that makes that switch happen from childhood to taking the responsibilities of adulthood. And in our culture, they're talking now about what they call prolonged adolescence, that they're not making this shift. So that was all I want to say. And so these flyers are over there, and this is the retribe thing I was talking about, that is rites of passage for teens. And we use 3 means. One is breath work, which is a very intense healing modality, body psychotherapy modality. And we use This is a picture of kids dressed up as nuns or, I don't know, elves or witches or something. We use this thing called adventure game theater where they take on an entirely different identity. And identity is a big thing in adolescence. And they take that on and they become an elf for a day. And then they go to put their old personality back on and they're like, oh wait, I don't necessarily have to have this personality. I could change the personality that I have into a different personality because I just became an elf. So that's an intensely fun experience for them. And then we also use nature processes, Native American, the sweat lodge, and the wilderness soul, and things like that. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you very much. And now we'll move on to Mark Cooperberg.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Cooperberg. I'm a clinical psychologist and director of psychological services at Princeton Speech, Language, and Learning Center, obviously in Princeton. Many of my clients know me as Dr. Coop, but you can call me Mark or whatever you like. I recently joined Princeton Speech and Language back in September after working at a group practice of psychologists called Behavior Therapy Associates in Somerset. So a lot of times when people learn about my work and they see my affiliation, they make assumptions about that I'm about speech and language. And I'm still a clinical psychologist. I just happen to work with a bunch of speech-language pathologists. I have a number of different brochures and information over there if you're interested in the services that we provide. But you can probably guess the types of things that I do as a psychologist in terms of providing therapy, assessments, evaluations, school observations, school-based consultations, and talks like this. Tonight I'm going to talk briefly about social skills. Usually when I'm talking about social skills, I have about 2 hours to talk about it, so I'm going to give you the very, very short version. But as you probably know, for many people, social skills are learned very early on in life, but for many individuals, there are delays or deficits in their social skills development. There are a variety of social skills that may fail to develop or may be underdeveloped, including empathy and perspective taking, peer interaction skills such as conversational skills or play skills, understanding nonverbal cues, being able to read the social context, social comprehension, which I refer to as the term for understanding of the impacts of one's behavior on the environment and other people, affect management or regulating one's emotions, and I know that that's going to be talked about a little bit later, and problem solving, which actually Jane spoke about, and I couldn't agree more in terms of the essential nature of teaching problem solving to our children and to our teenagers, because when they're on their own, they're going to need those skills and they're not going to be able to hear us telling them what to do all the time. When it comes to social skills training, one of the things that I really want to emphasize is its importance. I know that this is a group of people that are likely to think outside of the box maybe as compared to a typical group, and I'm sure that you're aware of the importance of social emotional learning. But many people kind of refer to relationships as the fourth R, so if we think about reading, writing, arithmetic, relationships are really the fourth R. They're that important. In fact, when they've done studies to predict adjustment in adulthood, getting along with others is a better predictor of adjustment than IQ, grades, or behavior. If we take a look into the research on health, people that have social relationships, or more specifically, people that are lacking social relationships, are at just as risk of danger as people who are obese, smoke, or have high blood pressure. So social relationships are incredibly important, not just to our mental health, but also our physical health. And for those of you that may have teenagers that you're thinking about their future and what may exist for them when they're done with their schooling, one of the slides that I often cover in my talks is, what is it that employers are actually looking for when they're looking to hire someone? And of course, many people, and if you would think about our typical school system, they might put at the top of the chart that they're looking for good readers and good writers and good mathematicians. But that actually ranks 7th on the list of things that they're looking for. Some of the things that precede those academic skills include group effectiveness, interpersonal skills, negotiation, and teamwork, personal management such as self-esteem, goal setting, and motivation, adaptability such as creative thinking and problem solving, and listening and oral communication. So those are things that we know that's what the employers are looking for. That doesn't mean that academics are not important, but it does suggest the significance of these skills beyond that of the formal education. Unfortunately, in a typical educational setting, The emphasis is on those academics, and there's not time set aside to teach social emotional learning. We're hoping that those things change, and there are some schools and some places where that's developing, and there's an increasing emphasis on social emotional learning. And when we do that, we typically want to incorporate a systematic approach. And that involves a number of different concepts. There's not just one method, but one is to teach students to become observational learners. Being an observational learner means you can learn from any experience that you observe. You don't have to be the one that is actually doing it, but you can learn from others. Whereas I like to joke from kids, it's learning without the consequence. So if you observe somebody else who got a ticket for speeding, learn from that and not get the ticket yourself. That's observational learning. We use role play to have kids and teenagers practice the skills that they need to utilize in real life. We provide continuous feedback to them. They need to know what it is that they're doing well and what it is that they can do better. And of course, we really want to develop a means to transfer those skills into the real world and not just do them in one setting. There are lots of social skills curricula that are out there, a lot of different methodologies. But one of the things that I wanted to emphasize tonight, and it actually piggybacks very well with what Jane was saying, is the importance of social problem solving. Many social skills groups and social skills curricula are built on developing specific discrete skills, how to have a conversation, how to have a good play date, how to introduce yourself, how to join a group. But if we teach students how to become good social problem solvers, they can apply the skills that they've learned into new situations that may not have been covered in a new situation that hasn't been presented before. So the idea fits with the adage of give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day,